What Milosevic has to do is very clear. There are 5 conditions NATO has set down, and all he has to do is act. He doesn't have to talk or sign anything to meet those conditions. He can stop the fighting, start a ceasefire in Kosovo, pull out his forces, and those include the army forces, they include the special police forces and the paramilitary forces. This would allow an international peacekeeping force with NATO at its core to come in, and this would enable the refugees to return home and eventually move to some sort of autonomous government. Those are the 5 conditions, and they don't require a deal, they don't require negotiations, they require action. He can act on those today.
Why should he comply now if, in fact, he's going to be indicted/arrested?
Well, I'm not saying that he is about to be indicted. That's a decision that he can make for the benefit of his people anytime.
Ken, are you saying that there is no reason to negotiate with Milosevic? And if so, what is Strobe Talbot doing in Moscow for the past week?
He's talking with the Russians. That's what he's doing in Moscow.
Well, even if Milosevic were to accept these 5 conditions, part of the negotiations, as I understand it, is just how that would be done, including withdrawal and the like. And I guess to follow up on Jamie's question, can you even negotiate with Milosevic to bring an end to this conflict, even if he accepts all 5 NATO terms, if he is in fact indicted and subject to arrest?
Well, the point I made is that negotiations aren't required for Milosevic to accept those 5 terms. If he wants the bombing to end, he knows what the 5 terms are. He knows NATO's phone number. He can call them up and say, I'm pulling out. You guys can come in and let the refugees come back. That can happen anytime. It doesn't require extensive negotiations. There are many other elements that may require discussions. But remember, the issue that's taking place today, the talks in Moscow and the talks elsewhere, involve a variety of issues. We support all efforts to achieve a peace settlement as long as that settlement has NATO's 5 conditions at the core.
But if Milosevic is an indicted war criminal, can you even support those discussions? If you don't want to call them negotiations, that's fine. But can you support discussions with an indicted war criminal? Does this, in effect, complicate whatever peace process or whatever possible settlement might be in the works?
At this stage, it's a hypothetical question because what we have is a news report about a potential indictment, but I have no confirmation that this, in fact, has or is about to occur.
Ken, you and I talked about this last week. Let me raise it again, please. The first 2 of the 5 do seem to be immutable. 1, withdrawal of forces. 2, allowing refugees to come back. But it would seem to perhaps the less involved observer that maybe there's a little wiggle room about the makeup of the peacekeeping force. And you have been saying, without any kind of equivocation, that NATO has to be the core of that. And I asked you before if it could be UN, and you gave me reasons why you thought not. But or let me put it another way, if the first 2 are in fact immutable, are the other 3 possibly open to negotiation?
Well, on the question of the peacekeeping force, I don't think the United States could be clearer about that than we've been. President Clinton has said NATO at the core, meaning NATO command and control. Secretary Cohen has said that. Secretary Albright has said that. Every spokesperson in the government has said that. I don't think we'd be more clear about that. Nothing has changed. We have said many times that there will be an analogy between this peacekeeping force and the peacekeeping force that went into Bosnia. That's a peacekeeping force that has NATO command and control. I don't know how we can be clearer about that. And no one has given any reason to suggest that there's give on that condition. Yes.
The British announced in the House of Commons today that their commitment to KFOR will be 20,000 troops, nearly half the force. Are we contemplating anything that substantial? And will we act as they have before NATO is fully decided?
Both those are good questions. The answer to the first question is that I would anticipate that we will make a contribution in the same percentage range that we were prepared to make in the first course, in the first force. That was approximately 14 or 15%. There has not been a presidential decision on this, but President Clinton has indicated that we would participate in a force earlier, but that it would be primarily a European force. And I don't anticipate that those basic guidelines will change. The exact numbers haven't been worked out yet. It's the U.S. feeling that we have been a major participant in the air campaign, and it's appropriate for Europe to play a major role in the peacekeeping force. We will certainly participate in an appropriate and significant way, however.
And a different subject, CNN reported yesterday that at least one and perhaps more non-governmental organizations are preparing to attempt some humanitarian airdrops in Kosovo. My question is, are you aware whether any of these groups have filed any flight plans or formal requests either with NATO or the UNHCR, or are you aware of the status of any of these planned flights, and is NATO prepared to help ensure the safety of those flights?
I am not aware that any non-government organization has filed a flight plan. Obviously, we would do what we could to deconflict NATO's continuing air campaign with humanitarian efforts. We're already doing that. There are convoys going in on a fairly regular basis. Some of these convoys are significant in terms of number of vehicles being used to take food into Kosovo, and some of that food is by arrangement going into Serbia as well. So we would do what we could to deconflict the air campaign with the humanitarian program.
Well, you're not aware of any imminent plans for airdrops or any imminent scheduled airdrops at this point?
I'm not aware that anybody has requested permission. That doesn't mean they haven't, but I'm not aware. Yeah.
And Italy and Germany have blocked on the NAC implementation of the oil embargo, mainly the boarding of ships and other craft without the permission of the countries involved. What is the Pentagon reaction to that, and how does that affect our ability to continue to try to hamper Yugoslavia's ability on its fuel?
Well, first of all, Jamie Shea said this morning that the NATO ambassadors, the members of the North Atlantic Council, had approved a concept of operations for visit and search, and he expected that the military committee would approve rules of engagement in the next few days. So I'm not
voluntary search and...
Well, I think until the work's complete on it, I won't comment on it. But second, there is a very small amount of oil going in through Montenegro today. Yesterday, I said that the last ship was last week. I think I misspoke. The last ship, I understand now, was May 3rd. And I don't believe there's been another ship since May 3rd. We monitor this closely, obviously, but much of the oil has stopped going into Montenegro, and the reason is because of the EU embargo, which countries are honoring. So Montenegro and its ports have ceased to be the major problem.
What about vessel traffic on the Danube where supplies are being brought?
Well, that's a different issue, and I talked about that yesterday. That is now the major source of supply for oil to Yugoslavia, and we are trying to stop that in two primary ways. One is by talking to the countries we believe are responsible for shipping that oil on the Danube, up the Danube into Yugoslavia, and two, by attacking port facilities along the Danube where the oil has to be offloaded into tanks and for eventual transportation. In addition, we have for 2 months now been attacking bridges and rail lines and other lines of communication that are necessary to transport the oil from storage facilities to the use points. So we will continue to do that. Now, one of the big impacts of cutting off electricity, something that you people ask about from time to time, is that it forces the military to use generators, diesel-fueled generators, which are very thirsty drinkers of fuel. And I think that to keep a Patriot battery going on generators for 24 hours takes 640 gallons of fuel, and they probably have much less efficient generators than we tend to have. So by cutting off the electricity, we force them to use, to divert a large amount of fuel to very fuel inefficient generators. And that, we think, is another way of choking off their military's ability to move and support itself.
Clear. Why isn't NATO attacking, I would assume, fairly slow-moving oil barges on the Danube, rather than just try to interdict the supply once it's ashore?
That is a question that involves all sorts of legal answers. But basically, the easiest way to stop this is to destroy the facilities where the oil is offloaded, the pumps, etc. You can't do anything with oil if you can't pump it out of the barges into tanks, and then from there pump it into transportation.
How self-contained pumping facilities? I thought many of them did pump it ashore.
It's then the question is, how do you get it out of the tanks into the trucks? Yeah.
Task Force Hawk is always, or has been presented as an arm of the air campaign. Would that remain so, or would that become part of K4?
Those are exactly the type of questions that we and General Clark and his commanders in Europe will be looking at as we decide how to formulate our contribution to the K4.
Speaking of legal issues, just a moment ago, is there anything technical, legal, legislative, diplomatic, anything that would prevent NATO, the U.S., from negotiating with an indicted war criminal? Is it codified somehow?
It's a good question. It's beyond my ken. I think you'd have to ask the legal advisor at the State Department. I just don't. I can't answer that.
And certainly, by all this shuttle diplomacy that Strobe Talbot is involved in, the U.S. and NATO have shown a willingness to at least engage in some indirect discussions with Milosevic about how to achieve this. Did what you say today indicate a hardening of that position? Are we withdrawing from any attempt to discuss, maybe not negotiate, but discuss a settlement with Milosevic here to end the fighting?
First of all, Milosevic is not the only person in the Yugoslav government. Second, many of the discussions involve issues about what the Russian role will be, what the Russian role will be in the UN Security Council. There are a number of balls in the air now. And I think that Secretary Talbot is keeping all those balls in the air. So we are trying to find the fastest way to get an end to the fighting that meets NATO's 5 demands. And that's what he's working on. Obviously, the role that Russia plays in the Security Council and perhaps in any sort of peacekeeping force that would come into play is important. And those are among the things that Strobe Talbot is talking about in Moscow. Clearly, Mr. Chernomyrdin has been going to Belgrade from time to time to talk with the Yugoslavs. I don't know the substance of all those conversations, but at the very least, he could just be saying, stop the fighting, pull out your troops, and this is the best way to save your country.
And who else in the Yugoslav government is Chernomyrdin, or are we trying to reach?
Well, we are not directly dealing with anybody in the Yugoslav government, I think you can appreciate. But they do have a foreign minister, and they have a president of the Serb Republic, and there are other officials there. I don't believe that President Milosevic ever signed any of the documents that or issued any statements, I could be wrong on this. There were official statements issued by other people in the government, Miltunovic, for instance, during the negotiations last fall and early this year that purported to represent the view of the government. So there are other people who have spoken for the government from time to time.
The United States believe that it's possible to reach an end to the fighting or to have the Yugoslav government agree to these 5 NATO terms without Milosevic?
I can't answer that question. Milosevic certainly knows what he has to do to end the fighting. Yes.
Former Prime Minister of Pakistan, Benazir Bhutto, was speaking yesterday at the Woodrow Wilson Center, and she said that Nawaz Sharif is a dictator, and the reason he detonated missiles and nuclear technology against India or in the region because he wanted to divert the tension so he can go after her and her family and her party. And she claims that there may be a war between India and Pakistan over this nuclear issues and missile technology. But at the same time, now there's a fighting going on the seas line on the border of India and Pakistan because there are 400 or more militants which has been sent by Pakistan into India in the Kashmir, and Indian military is now fighting in the mountains, and number of casualties are there, and Pakistan have warned India not to interfere and stop all this, otherwise the consequences will not be good, very good.
Well, first of all, I can't comment on what former Prime Minister Bhutto said because I didn't hear it or read about it. Second, it is of great concern to the United States and many other nations that there could be a flare-up, potentially involving nuclear weapons between India and Pakistan, and that's exactly why we've been so concerned about the testing that has gone on, and it's also why we're concerned about the continuing tension in Jammu and Kashmir. This is an issue of considerable concern to us and to other countries as well. We've urged India and Pakistan to try to resolve these difficulties to stop the fighting, so far without success, but we do think that that's the right way to go.
Over this tension in the area, if any of the country's military wing have contact with Pentagon or the U.S. government or over this warning?
I'm not aware that they have contacted us.
And you, just getting back to this stop loss invocation, you sort of portrayed this as almost routine or business as usual, but and you said the last time this happened was during the Gulf War, but during the Gulf War there were 500,000 troops in the Persian Gulf. We don't even have a tenth of that now, and doesn't this show, in fact, that the Air Force is critically short in some areas of personnel, which really doesn't seem like a big secret at this point? The fact that you have to actually prevent people who voluntarily join the service from voluntarily leaving, they can't leave now. So it's sort of a much stronger measure than just say activating.
That's a very good question to ask the Air Force. This is a reasonable act for the Air Force to take at a time when it's made a major contribution to this conflict. It's the service that has been bearing the heavy lifting and doing most of the fighting. Of course, the Navy's involved, and the Marines are about to start. The Marines have been flying Harriers, and they're about to start flying F/A-18s. I don't know whether they've been flying F/A-18s off the Theodore Roosevelt. So the Marines have been involved as well, but it's been primarily an Air Force engagement at this time. And this is a prudential action to allow the Air Force to hold on to some of its most skilled people at a time when their knowledge, energy, and skill is most necessary.
Should the Navy face a freeze order too because of its pilots and stuff?
The Navy has looked at its situation and decided that it's okay.
Just to follow up on a completely different subject, for the second night now in a row, the President Milosevic's presidential villa on the outskirts of Belgrade has been targeted. And all these attacks on Milosevic's homes, is there any evidence that he's anything other than alive and well? I mean, is there any evidence to indicate he's either been injured or his health is in any way suffering because of these attacks?
I'm sure that he has been psychologically rattled by these attacks. It could well be that he's not sleeping well, either because of the attacks or because his concerns that his policies are not working. But I have no firm evidence of what his physical or mental state is at this stage. General Wald.
Would the Air Force like us to sign up as old vets to help out?
I'm sure you have your leather jacket. You're welcome.
Good afternoon. As I mentioned yesterday, the weather over the last 24 hours has been excellent. A little bit of clouds this morning. That's cleared up, and then the next several days, out to 10 days or so, it looks like it'll be clear flying. maybe a thunderstorm or two in the afternoons, but should accommodate all we need to do. This type of weather with the increase of aircraft over the last few days has now gotten to the point where the Kosovo engagement zone is being covered 24 hours a day, around the clock, which is a little different than in the past where we had some gaps in the coverage. During those gaps, it appears he may have moved around his forces in Kosovo in the past. As we get more aircraft in this type of weather, that'll take away his sanctuary to even move his forces in Kosovo around. And as he does move, it'll make it easier for us to find them and destroy them. So that combined with the number of aircraft, this type of weather, and the increase in daylight, will make it exceedingly difficult for him to move his forces in any type of way at all in Kosovo without being attacked. Last 24 hours were excellent for targeting, 58 total targets, majority of forces on the ground. As you can see, many of them in the southwest portion of Kosovo where they've congregated many of their capabilities and some of their artillery. A lot of that was hit yesterday again, 14 of those at least. Several tanks, 5, some mortar positions were hit. I understand today with the weather clearing they've had at least 10 tanks destroyed. That's a preliminary number. That's in addition to those 5. And a very successful day so far in the Kez as well as throughout the Fry. Yesterday you can see that several command and control targets were hit. We mentioned those. I'll show some imagery of that. Some radio relay sites, their comms are going down. More sustainment, some POL runways are being attacked in their air defense. They had several SAMs fired last night, all of those unguided. So they still continue to try to shoot aircraft down, but their IADS has been degraded to the point where when they do turn on their radars, they'll be attacked.
Yes, gentlemen.
I think yesterday there were almost 700 combat type sorties where they're SEAD and CAP, et cetera, and they have another 1,000 scheduled today, of which about 800 of those are in the combat type category. Mr. Bacon mentioned the contribution of the United States from an air perspective, and I think this tells the story pretty well. There's 717 total U.S. aircraft in the area. The majority of those attack type aircraft, although we have the majority of the tankers, nearly 165 tankers in the region now, which is getting up to the number that we had in the Gulf War. A lot of reconnaissance. The aircraft carrier Roosevelt is still in the area, operating around the clock, day in and day out, along with the complement of ships they have with them. The Allies are up to 324. They have 71 more aircraft over the last few days have arrived, 39 more fighter bombers, and about 30 more reconnaissance aircraft. And you can see the countries that are participating, along with the United States, and it's over 1,000, almost 1,052 aircraft now participating in this. The refugee situation over the last few days has increased the outflow of refugees from Kosovo. 10,000 in the last 24 hours, 8,500 of those into the FIROM, the remainder into Albania. There still has been, over the last 2 days, 2,500 refugees departing Macedonia. Fort Dix has had nearly 100 depart yesterday. And as Mr. Bacon alluded to, the humanitarian airdrop planning continues. That's a civilian operation, and if that occurs, and when it does, the KAOC will be in full coordination with that.
With any of these organizations,
The
and
KAOC
or
is
their
not in any discussion with them, but when the time comes, if it does, we assume they'll be coordinated on the air tasking order, where they would fly and when they would fly, but the military is not doing the coordination with them. Macedonian refugee crisis continues. Over the past 3 days, over 23,000 refugees into the FIROM. We don't expect that flow to decrease, but there are numerous different things being done to take care of that, as we've spoken in the past several times. Once again, several nations, dozens of nations have agreed to take nearly 160,000 refugees. More than 60,000 of those have been moved into those different countries over the last few weeks. The U.S. Continues to plan to accept 20,000 here in the United States. Speaking of Fort Dix, there are 3,460 there now. 4,545 total refugees have arrived in the United States. 643 of those have gone directly to families that are sponsoring them. And then another 195 now have departed Fort Dix, and that outflow from Fort Dix is increasing on a daily basis as they get more and more used to the routine there as far as processing. And you can see the flights coming back into Fort Dix over the next few days, and the Health and Humanitarian Services is handling the majority of the work there, and the U.S. military is in support at Fort Dix on that one. Once again, the refugee continue. Many of those that were in Kosovo are now exiting Kosovo for various reasons that unknown to us. The camps continue to be built. Camp Eagle is in the process of formal siting and watching for, it has a possibility of some flooding in the area they're looking at, so we want to make sure that's not a problem over the next few months. And once again, the contributions from the nation are still needed to take care of the folks that are in the camps themselves. Jamie, I think you asked about the bunker earlier. This is a overhead imagery of, it's a little bit difficult to see, but this is his villa, Milosevic's villa. This is a command bunker where they have a command and control area here. And you can see just right here the entry was hit, and that entry to that bunker and probably down into the bunker itself was attacked successfully, and the entry part showed damage, and we estimate the bunker itself was damaged as well. This is the Ministry of the MUP Internal Affairs in downtown Belgrade, struck yesterday. It's in the west central part of Belgrade in the city itself. You can see a couple of the areas here were struck successfully. That's the headquarters for both their Navy and their Ministry of Defense for the MUP. This is a Sremska Mitrovica Ordnance Storage Depot. You can see this is a pre-strike picture here of several buildings in that area. This is in northwest Serbia. It's in support of the 1st Army. This was attacked by a B-52, 2 of those with 88 Mark 82 gravity bombs. You can see all the buildings in that area have been destroyed. And this is a good example of an area target for a B-52 where there wouldn't be a lot of collateral damage potential. And that area has been basically wiped out. This is the Belgrade Militia Depot area. This is a pre-strike picture. Once again, a large ordnance and vehicle storage area for the MUP. Once again, that's been attacked. You can see several of the buildings have been taken down, some of them destroyed totally in these areas here. This area here has been destroyed as well. This is, Mr. Bacon talked about fuel and where they're getting their fuel. When they do get it, the fuel out of Montenegro has been decreased to a trickle of less than that possibly. This is Prehovo along the Danube River. All the fuel storage there was, I think, almost 250,000 gallons has been destroyed, as well as the pump houses, and these offload areas along the land area, not on the river itself, they have been destroyed, so no more fuel can be offloaded there. There's a few targets left, but he doesn't have as much as he had before, that's for sure, Ivan. Just a few images from yesterday. This is the theater operation weather as of 5 this morning. You can see most of it clear, a little bit of high cirrus, not too much. Most of the area is clear for ops, and you can see back in here it's pretty clear as well. So expect outstanding weather the next week or so, which will translate to increased ops. This is the projected weather through 2400Z tomorrow morning. You can see some minor fog clouds in the early portion of the morning, and as it clears out and back in here it's all clear, just some land fog and a little bit of high deck cloud. It clears out in good shape up in the Kosovo area and into the Fry itself. Excellent weather, and like I said before, we expect this to be the trend now for the next few months, and certainly over the next 10 days it should be similar to that. Some of the targets hit. This is in northwest of Belgrade. Com site, still a fairly highly defended area, although I said earlier they're shooting many of their SAMs in a ballistic mode. You can see there's a second bomb coming into the cursor. That was his wingman hit the first target, and that was one of their major remaining com sites in the north. This is a com tower in Novi Sad, northern Serbia. It's a difficult tower to hit. Also, there's a lot of weather in here, and you can see the pilot's working hard to avoid the weather with the laser. The bomb will come in from this side, and in fact, because of this, it looks like it hits just at the base of the tower. There's in fact a building below that they were attacking. The tower did not go down, but I would call that probably a miss. It's an alternate command post in Pristina. Ivan, you mentioned what he has left. Whatever he has left militarily until he decides he wants to meet the demands will be destroyed. This is another one of his command and control sites. He does have a lot of workarounds, but as these are taken out, he has to do more and more working around, which takes away his capability to have a synergistic effect on his military. Novi Sad SATCOM Center. This is an F-18 with laser-guided bomb. This film shows a previous bomb has already hit under here, and then this F-18 will hit the target area below the previous bomb, right on top of it.
Off the TR.
No, this is not out of Hungary. A sustainment target. The aircraft out of Hungary have not started flying yet. Weapons storage facility at Sabac Army Barracks in northern Serbia. It's an F-15E with an LGB last night. Still a little bit of weather last night, you can see. Made it a little bit difficult, but he still was able to get the bomb on this target. Looks like one lands a little short, maybe 500 feet, and the other one hit the target. No collateral. Vehicle storage building and Krivovo, support base, central Serbia, I should say, or Kosovo. You can see the buildings have been hit before. This again goes back to your question, Ivan, what's left? Whatever's left will hit it. This one had something in it. You can see there's pretty good secondaries from here and some burning afterwards. Those two 2,000-pound laser-guided bombs. You can see the burning afterwards and the building pretty much destroyed. This is a petroleum storage tank in Bačenica airfield, northern Serbia, F-16 with a laser-guided bomb. These are underground storage area. He's having his fuel. You can see quite a few secondaries off to the right from that. And his fuel is being taken down in a big way. And once again, he really is having problem maintaining his capability to refuel his vehicles, etc. Sjenica airfield runway in southwest Serbia, F-16 with a laser-guided bomb again. You can see where they're trying to repair this. They've made some workarounds here. You see a B-52 strike across there from before. Just about the time they get ready to get the runway back open, we'll close it, which I'm sure for their Air Force is frustrating, but that's unfortunate. This is Sjenica airfield, hardened aircraft shelter, southwest Serbia. F-15E with a 2,000-bomb penetrator. This penetrates the bunker and destroys anything that was in it. You can see a fairly large secondary came out the front, so there may have been an aircraft or munitions or something in there. Forces on the ground. Novi Pazar Army Barracks, southwest Serbia. This is a 3rd Army support facility. The majority of the 3rd Army support facilities, upwards to 90%, have been destroyed. You can see those two hit the target. That should be all the film for today. Any questions?
In the air at all off these airfields?
There are indications they're still attempting to fly some of their helicopters for resupply. I haven't heard of any of their aircraft trying to attack anything recently, but they could try to fly those off roads or off unprepared strips or whatever. So when we see them, we'll go ahead and attack. Jamie?
Milosevic alive and well at this point?
As far as I know, he's alive. I don't know how well he is.
General Yurts the other day gave out some figures that indicated that about nearly 30% of the munitions now are non-precision. Can you describe sort of what's changed in the air campaign that's brought that about?
I can. I'm having a chart built because I understood he said that. But basically what's happened in the first part of the campaign, because of the requirement to take down his integrated air defense, the fact that his integrated air defense was very, very robust. As a matter of fact, the best integrated air defense possibly in the Warsaw Pact, before the Warsaw Pact came apart, as good or better than the Iraqi air defense. So many of the sorties then were flown in conditions where it was very highly defended against very high value targets, very precise pinpoint type targets. And also, because of that, we didn't have the opportunity to fly back over targets because of weather or other reasons. We wanted to hit it the first time. So the majority of the weapons at the beginning of the campaign in the 90s, for a period of time, 90% were precision. As that integrated air defense was taken down more and more to the point where we had local air superiority and could fly with a little less danger or risk, albeit still risky, and the campaign switched more to a sustainment and forces on the ground type campaign, and aircraft like the B-52 with gravity bombs or the B-1 were able to penetrate in a acceptable risk fashion. Then we've switched more to the majority of the bombs because of the B-52 and B-1 drop. B-52 44 bombs each and the B-1 80 bombs, 82. Then we've switched more to that type of bomb, and as you saw earlier, runways, POL, ammunition storage areas that would accommodate that type of weapon have been attacked in a bigger way. So if you take one B-52 or a B-2, for example, with 82 bombs on it, that's 41 F-16 sorties with precision bombs. So even though it looks like we've switched to a more gravity type campaign, we still are flying a lot of precision, but the numbers go up dramatically when you start dropping those numbers off those type aircraft. So that would be the answer to that.
Targeting highways, roads, bridges, infrastructure targets like that, can you give me a sense of what goes into the thinking from this perspective? Are you thinking about preserving key pieces of the infrastructure that KFOR will presumably need when they first go in, or are you really unable to think in those terms and you have to destroy what you need to and just try to rebuild it later?
I think General Clark is thinking in those terms. I mean, this is a much more sophisticated campaign than probably people have given credit to it. I think the primary issue is still to destroy his military to the point where it makes Milosevic decide he has to do something different, whatever that may be. But also, there is consideration for hitting targets that don't have a military value. We avoid those, or things that wouldn't be beneficial for us to destroy. So we're not just willy-nilly destroying anything that we see out there. But certainly in the campaign itself, to degrade his military, anything that has military impact or is of military value is eligible to be targeted. And then those targets will be selected by General Clark and his staff to make the impact at that particular time and because of the environment at that time or whatever else. So I guess to answer your question, the most important thing for the campaign from a military perspective is to degrade his military capability, and whichever targets those are, we'll destroy those.
Can you be a little more specific about what you're avoiding destroying? Because you may...
Well, I'll give you an example. And I think Mr. Bacon and I both talked about this a lot. In southern Kosovo, the bridges and the locks in southern Kosovo have not been attacked, and that's for good reason. I mean, we have no reason to destroy that. There's no threat coming from that area, and the refugees will use those locks to go back in when they go back in. So that would be a great example, I believe. Jim?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Oh, General, if Serb troops in Kosovo can basically avoid destruction by staying put and not moving around, how do you not, in the end, have a standoff if no ground troops, if no NATO ground troops wind up going in?
Well, it's going to be pretty hard for them to hide. And over time, we'll find them, and we have bombs and weapons that can destroy bunkered vehicles as well as vehicles that are hiding in the trees, etc. So it may not be as rapid when they're hiding, but we'll find them and destroy them. So they really don't have much of a sanctuary anyplace.
General, how many refugees do you now estimate are still inside of Kosovo, and do they appear to be moving the final, doing a final clearing of Kosovo now?
I've seen estimates of around 580,000. I'm not sure. I don't think anybody is totally sure, but there still are several hundred thousand. They're citizens of Kosovo in Kosovo, whether they be Serb or Albanians. But there are several hundred thousand. Some are displaced, and some are still in their homes. Now, Serbians live in Kosovo, so they still live in their homes.
Is the shortage of pilots in the U.S. Air Force one of the main factors behind the decision to invoke the stop-loss authority?
I really can't speak for the Air Force. I think Mr. Bacon mentioned that, but I suspect not a shortage necessarily, but the fact that there isn't any secret, and I suspect that probably is part of the fact that we don't have all the pilots we would like right now.
This way, what does by instituting this, what does that capability does it give you? I mean, for instance, does it mean that some of your best trained, most qualified pilots will still be around for a while to help out with this action? I mean, is that the result of this?
Well, all the pilots are really well-trained and qualified. Ironically, many of those really well-trained, qualified pilots are in the Guard and Reserve, which are moving over as we speak now. The Guard unit that arrived in Trapani about a week and a half ago, the A-10s from Massachusetts, Michigan, and Idaho have an average flying hours per pilot of about 2,000 hours. Many of them have combat time, so many of our real high flying experienced pilots are in the Guard and Reserve. But it's not a matter of experience so much, it's just a matter of trained pilots. It takes a long time to train them, and we want to keep as many as we can right now until this is finished.
General, going back to the beginning of the campaign, how would you compare the IAD around Belgrade with Hanoi and Haiphong during the key part of the Vietnam War, when the air defenses there were really formidable?
I think it's probably, I don't know what the percentage would be, but a lot more significant in capability. In Hanoi and Haiphong, they had SA-2 type SAMs that were at that time capable. Obviously, our equipment has increased and improved in technology significantly, as well as theirs. So, but they have they had different SAMs. They still have some in the fry. They had the SA-6, the SA-2, the SA-3, with a lot different types of radar, some Western, some Soviet built, and probably a lot better integrated air defense capability. And certainly, as I've said before, arguably one of probably the best air defense threat, the highest air defense threat of any nation that we've faced, I think probably in our air history, frankly. So very outstanding. Now, it's not as good as it was, obviously. They've been degraded significantly, but they still have some capability.
Have you seen any change, significant change in the number of MUP and VJ in and around Kosovo? We've been talking 40,000, 46,000. Has that gone up?
The number I've heard is still around that number. So I think it's still, what our estimates are still around that same number. Could be a little less, but I think it's still around that number. Yeah.
What did you think of General Reimer's comments that he had doubts at the beginning of this that air power alone could accomplish the goal?
I didn't see those comments. I'm not sure what the comment after that was, but I didn't see those at all.
As I read General Reimer's comments, he said that the choice was not between ground troops and air power. The choice was between air power and doing nothing, because he pointed out that there was no consensus in NATO to use ground troops at the time this campaign was started, and probably now. So the choice that was presented to the chiefs, and the Secretary has talked about this, General Shelton has talked about this as well, was either we participate in an air campaign or we sit by and watch ethnic brutality, maybe genocide, take place. And given that choice, the chiefs agreed that it was preferable to go ahead with an air campaign than to sit idly by. And that was the decision.
Opinion of the chiefs?
That was, as reported by both General Shelton and Secretary Cohen, I think, to Congress back in March.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you know what percentage?